He was arrested for trespassing in a storm, mocked in court as just another homeless man, until he said his name, and the entire room rose in silence. Rain hammered the crumbling rooftops of East St. Louis like it had something to prove. It wasn't the gentle kind either. It came down hard, soaking every inch of pavement, drowning out car horns and sirens with its relentless noise. Curtis R. Ellison stood by a chain-link fence near the corner of State and 15th Street, shivering beneath a worn army jacket that didn't zip up anymore. His shoes, one duct-taped at the toe, squished with every step. He didn't say much. He rarely did. People stopped listening years ago. There was a building on that block, once a community center, now a hollowed-out shell of forgotten hope. Curtis had seen it a few days before and thought maybe, just maybe, he could slip inside and stay dry. Just for the night. He wasn't trying to cause trouble. He wasn't hurting anyone. The broken window on the side had already been busted by someone else. He didn't even need to climb, just duck and walk. Inside, the air was musty with rot and soaked insulation. A dead pigeon lay in the corner. The carpet smelled like old socks and something worse. Curtis didn't care. He found a spot near the wall, sat down on an old chair without a back, and closed his eyes. He didn't sleep long. A bright flashlight cut across the room, followed by the loud snap of boots. "Hey, you, get up!" a voice barked. Curtis didn't move at first. He thought maybe it wasn't for him. "I said get your ass up!" Curtis opened his eyes. A cop, white, maybe late 30s, stood with his hand already hovering above his taser. Curtis raised his hand slowly, palms open. "Wasn't doing nothing, sir. Just staying dry. You break in here?" Curtis shook his head. "Didn't break. It was already open. That's trespassing. Let's go." Curtis tried to stand but struggled. His right knee, busted years ago in a jump gone bad, cracked with each movement. The cop grabbed his elbow hard and yanked. "You drunk?" "No, sir." "You smell like piss." Curtis didn't respond. He just looked down at the floor as the officer shoved him out into the rain. By the time they reached the patrol car, water had soaked through his pants. The handcuffs bit into his wrists. Curtis didn't protest, didn't yell, didn't ask for help. The only sound he made was a small grunt as the car door closed behind him. The officer didn't ask his name until they got to the station. "Name?" Curtis didn't answer. The officer sighed, frustrated. "You hard of hearing?" Curtis cleared his throat. Curtis R. Ellison." The officer typed it in. "Middle name?" "Raymond." "Birthday?" Curtis gave it. August 9th, 1961. As the cop read something on the screen, his eyes narrowed slightly. "You a veteran or something?" Curtis just said, "Used to be." "Yeah? That's what all of you say. Guess it didn't work out too good, huh?" No reply. In booking, they took his jacket. Didn't notice the dog tags tucked under his second shirt. Or maybe they didn't care. He sat on a bench for 3 hours, wet and cold, staring at the crack in the floor. The only warm thing he had was a paper cup of instant coffee, lukewarm and bitter. When they finally brought him out to take his mugshot, the officer behind the camera chuckled. "Smile, hero." Curtis didn't move. His face stayed stone still. Years of silence had trained him well, but the charge was simple. Misdemeanor trespassing. One of dozens the system cycles through every day. Nobody noticed the name. Nobody looked deeper. They assigned him a public defender he hadn't met yet, gave him a court date, and sent him to the holding tank to wait. Curtis leaned back against the wall, eyes half closed, counting the ceiling tiles out of habit. He'd been here before. Not this cell, not this city, but this kind of place, where your story didn't matter, where people only saw the stink, the wrinkles, the problem. Not the man, not the years, not the service, but the courtroom tomorrow wouldn't be like the others. Something was coming. He just didn't know it yet. It was barely past 9 a.m. when Curtis shuffled into courtroom 4C at the St. Louis County Courthouse. He hadn't shaved. His hair, peppered gray and knotted at the back, was pressed unevenly from sleeping against concrete. His shoes squeaked. One dragged slightly behind the other. The bailiff didn't announce him. He just nodded toward a folding chair at the side of the room and motioned for Curtis to sit. The room was already half full. A few teenagers in oversized hoodies waiting on probation hearings, a woman fussing over her crying toddler, 3 men in button-downs talking too loud near the back row. Curtis sat quietly, holding a manila folder that contained nothing. It had been handed to him without explanation that morning, just part of the routine. His public defender hadn't shown up. The clerk read names. People walked up, took their scolding, paid their fines, and left. Nobody really looked at him, until the prosecutor spoke up. Next on the docket, Curtis Raymond Ellison, charged with misdemeanor trespassing. Arrested inside 1250 Dunn Avenue, formerly the Henderson Rec Center. Curtis stood slowly, hands by his sides. The courtroom was already moving on before he made it to the front. "Mr. Ellison," the prosecutor began, barely glancing at him. "This isn't your first time loitering, trespassing, or breaking into city property. Your rap sheet reads like a weathered map of bus stops and abandoned buildings." A few people chuckled under their breath. "In fact," the prosecutor continued, "you've been arrested or cited a total of 13 times in the past 5 years. Always the same offense, always the same line. Just trying to stay dry. You've become somewhat of a habitual drifter." That got louder laughs. Someone coughed to cover a snort. Even one of the security guards cracked a half smile. Curtis didn't flinch. He just stood there. Judge Raymond Halbrook lifted his reading glasses slightly. He hadn't said a word yet. He leaned forward now, looking at the sheet of paper on the bench in front of him. He studied the name again. "Mr. Ellison," the judge said finally. "Please confirm your full name for the court." Curtis looked up. "Curtis Raymond Ellison," he said. "Sergeant First Class, retired, United States Army, 3rd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment." There was a pause, longer than usual. It wasn't just silence, it was something heavier. People shifted in their seats. The same ones who laughed were now quiet. A younger bailiff, maybe mid-20s, straightened up from where he'd been leaning against the wall. He stared at Curtis for a moment, eyes wide, then stood to his feet. Nobody said anything. Then another man in the front row, wearing a worn leather vest with a patch that read "Vietnam Vet," slowly rose. Within seconds, 2 more stood, then 4, then 7. A ripple through the courtroom. The judge didn't move yet, but his expression had changed. The prosecutor blinked, confused. "Your Honor?" But Halbrook was already pushing back from the bench. He stood up slowly, eyes fixed on Curtis. "Recess," he said, voice low and steady. 10 minutes. Bailiff, clear the room except for court staff. Curtis didn't understand what was happening. For the first time in years, he felt everyone was looking at him, but not with pity, not with scorn, but with recognition, and maybe something close to respect. The door clicked shut behind the last spectator, leaving only the judge, the prosecutor, a paralegal, and Curtis still standing in the center. The air in courtroom 4C changed, like the room itself was holding its breath. Judge Halbrook walked down from the bench. Not fast, not slow, just deliberate. He didn't look at the prosecutor. He didn't look at the clerk. His eyes stayed on Curtis the entire time. "You said 3rd Battalion, 75th Rangers?" the judge asked, voice quieter now, almost careful. "Yes, sir." Halbrook's mouth opened slightly, but no sound came. He stopped about 6 feet away and took a breath. "You were part of the Ravenna extraction, weren't you?" Curtis blinked. That wasn't a question he expected to hear in a county courtroom. "April 92, near Ramadi. Ambush. Black Hawk down. Intel was wrong. Everything went sideways." Curtis nodded slowly. "Yeah, I was there." The judge nodded back, eyes glassing over. "So was I. Different squad, but same operation. We lost 4 men that day. They said your team pulled out 5 wounded from a crossfire zone, under open sky. No air cover." Curtis lowered his eyes. Didn't do it alone. No, Halbrook said. But your name was on the report. That's why I remember. The prosecutor shuffled uncomfortably. Your Honor, I don't mean to interrupt, but You did already, Halbrook cut in, turning to him sharply. Sit down. The room went still again. The judge turned back to Curtis. Why didn't you say anything before? Curtis shrugged lightly. No one ever asked? Halbrook looked at the bailiff. Get me his full file. Military service, VA status, everything. The bailiff rushed out without a word. Curtis stood awkwardly. For a moment he looked smaller, like all the years he'd been trying to disappear finally caught up to him. I'm not here for a medal, he said. I just needed a place to sleep. I understand, the judge said. But this isn't just about sleeping in an abandoned building anymore. He paused, rubbed the bridge of his nose, then said something no one expected. Would you sit with me for a moment, Mr. Ellison? Curtis hesitated. Here? No. Chambers. Curtis followed him out. The hallway echoed with the sound of their steps, as if the building itself wasn't used to this kind of walk. Not side by side. Not like this. Inside Chambers, the judge poured them both coffee from a thermos. No assistants. No script. He motioned to the chair across from his desk. Please. Curtis sat. You still in the system? Halbrook asked. The VA? Yeah. Curtis chuckled without humor. On paper. What happened, Curtis? I mean it. I read your name on that report over 30 years ago. I never forgot it. We thought you were gone. You saved people. You were supposed to make it. I did, Curtis said quietly. Until I didn't. The judge said nothing. He waited. Curtis stared at the cup of coffee, his fingers wrapped tight around it even though it was too hot. Came home in '94. Found work for a bit. Warehouse job in Kansas City. Got laid off. Then my wife got sick. Real sick. Medicaid got tied up. I sold the car to pay for her chemo. She didn't make it. Halbrook's jaw clenched slightly. After that, things moved fast. I stopped going to the VA. Couldn't get my benefits adjusted. Every office said to go to the next one. I started missing rent. Slept in the car until I couldn't keep it registered. Then I was just out. The judge let it settle. Nobody helped? Curtis laughed again. Softer this time. Sadder. People tried. Church groups. A nurse at the clinic. But there's only so much kindness before folks get tired. Halbrook looked down at his desk. I'm sorry. Curtis shook his head. Wasn't your fault. No, the judge said. But it's been someone's fault for too long. But Halbrook wasn't just hearing a story. He was remembering the mission and realizing the system didn't lose Curtis. It discarded him. The two men sat in silence for a few moments longer. No legal jargon, no courtroom pretense, just two former soldiers sharing bad coffee in a room that hadn't seen real honesty in years. Judge Halbrook stood up first. Stay here a minute. Curtis watched him leave through the side door, his boots echoing faintly down the hall. The kind of walk that said he had something on his mind and wasn't going to let it sit. Outside, the judge flagged down his clerk and ordered a full background pull, not just court records. He wanted Curtis's discharge paperwork, his DD-214, VA claims, everything that showed what this man had done and what had been done to him. 15 minutes later, Halbrook sat back down in Chambers with a thick file in his hands. He didn't read it aloud. He didn't have to. Combat Infantry Badge, Army Commendation Medal with Valor, Bronze Star, 4 overseas deployments, honorably discharged. And then, applications denied. No fixed address, missed appointments. System closed his case file. Curtis looked down at the floor. I stopped trying to explain myself. After a while, they stopped listening. You served your country. Halbrook said, gave more than most. And somehow you're standing here being called a habitual drifter by a guy who probably never saw past his own desk. Curtis gave a half smile. Yeah, but I get it. I look like a problem. No, Halbrook said. You look like someone this country owes a hell of a lot more than a court date. He stood again and paced behind his desk. The silence wasn't awkward. It was loaded. Finally, Halbrook leaned forward on the edge of his desk, staring straight at Curtis. "Do you want help?" Curtis blinked. "Help? Real help. Not a pamphlet, not a pat on the back, not a cot in a shelter with 3 other men coughing all night. I mean housing, medical care, a case manager who won't just forget your name." Curtis looked cautious. "They always say help's coming. Then it doesn't." "I'm not they," Halbrook replied, firm. "Not today." Curtis didn't answer right away. He looked down at the old, frayed dog tags around his neck. One of them was bent, the metal warped from something that probably saved his life long ago. He nodded once. Not dramatic. "Just enough. All right," he said quietly. "I'll take the help. If it's real." The judge opened a drawer, pulled out a phone, and dialed. "Get me Janice Meadows at Veteran Outreach. Tell her it's urgent. And yes, she'll take my call. Tell her I have a client who shouldn't be in court. He should be under a roof." He hung up. "You're not going back into that courtroom as a defendant, not after this." Curtis raised an eyebrow. "Then what am I?" "A man who deserves to be heard. I'll do the talking." A knock at the door broke the moment. The bailiff stepped in. "Court's waiting, Your Honor." Halbrook gave a short nod. "They can wait a little longer." But he stood anyway. "Let's finish this the right way." Curtis followed him out again. The courtroom had filled back up. People were curious. Whispers passed through the crowd like wind through tall grass. The judge stepped up to the bench, looked around, then banged the gavel once. "Before we continue with the docket," he said, "I need to address something not as a judge, but as someone who served." People straightened up. "There are times this courtroom hears from men and women who've made mistakes, but once in a while we see someone whose only mistake was surviving without being seen." He turned toward Curtis. "Sergeant First Class Curtis Ellison is not a drifter. He's not a criminal. He is a veteran of 4 combat deployments. He is a man this nation has failed, and that failure ends today." But he wasn't just declaring it for the room. He was daring the system to prove him wrong. The courtroom had gone still, not tense, not stunned, just still, like everyone was trying to catch up to what they were witnessing. Judge Halbrook didn't say anything else right away. He took off his glasses, placed them gently on the bench, and stepped down again, this time motioning for Curtis to come forward. Curtis hesitated, then stepped to the center of the room. "I'm not here to put you on trial, Mr. Ellison," the judge said, not looking at the file in front of him anymore. "But I think this court and this community deserve to hear something that we've been ignoring for too long. If you're willing to tell it." Curtis didn't speak for a few seconds. He looked at the bailiff who had stood up earlier. He looked at the guy in the back row still wearing his veteran patch. Then he looked at the judge. "You want to know what happened?" he asked. "All right." He shifted his weight, pulled his sleeves down a little, as if he were bracing for a cold wind that wasn't there. "After I came home, I thought it'd be simple. I thought I'd take off the uniform and go back to being a person. I had a wife, Janine. She used to meet me at the bus stop when I worked late, just so I wouldn't walk alone. We had a little place in Topeka. I worked nights stocking shelves, then later in a loading dock. Not glorious, but steady." He paused, eyes fixed on the floor now. "Then she got sick. Ovarian cancer. Came fast, no warning. Insurance didn't cover the treatments she needed. The VA helped a little, but it was all too slow. Bureaucracy takes time, and cancer doesn't." He rubbed his palms together like he was trying to scrape the memories off. "I sold everything we had worth anything. The car, her piano, wedding rings, just to keep her on the trial medication. But it wasn't enough. She died in the middle of winter. I couldn't even afford a proper funeral. Buried her with a county voucher and a borrowed coat." There was no sound in the room now. "After that, I stopped trying. I'd go to interviews, try to smile, pretend I wasn't falling apart. But every 'we'll call you' turned into nothing. Started drinking a little, then a lot. Got evicted when I missed 3 months of rent. Slept in the car until the tags expired. Then I just started walking." The judge didn't interrupt. No one dared. Curtis took a shaky breath and kept going. "I'd try shelters. Some were okay, most were full. I kept thinking, tomorrow will be different, but tomorrow never came. I tried getting back into the VA system, but with no address, no phone, no case manager, I was just another lost file. I sat in waiting rooms for hours just to be told I was in the wrong place. He wiped his nose with the sleeve of his coat. I stopped asking for help when I realized nobody even looked me in the eyes anymore. At that, the prosecutor looked down at his own shoes. Curtis looked around the room. I'm not asking anyone here to feel sorry for me. I'm not a hero. I just want to be seen like a man again. Not like trash. His voice didn't crack. It didn't rise. It was quiet. Matter of fact. Like a man who's told the story so many times, it doesn't sting the same, but still leaves a bruise. The judge finally spoke again. Mr. Ellison, if you had come into this courtroom yelling, cursing, blaming the world, I might have seen you like every other case file. But you didn't. You stood there and let them laugh at you, and still held your ground. Curtis gave a small shrug. Sometimes silence is all you got left. Halbrook nodded. I want to say something that you probably haven't heard in a while. You matter, Mr. Ellison, and I am sorry this system, my system, failed you. But what Curtis didn't know yet was that the judge wasn't finished. The courtroom had seen his fall. Now they were about to witness what justice might look like when someone actually listens. The judge stepped back behind the bench, not to create distance, but to do what the robe still gave him the authority to do: make things right. He cleared his throat. This court is not just a place for punishment. It is supposed to be where truth meets consequence. And if we're being honest today, the consequence of our failure isn't just Mr. Ellison's homelessness. It's the message it sends, that a man can serve with honor, then be forgotten like yesterday's paperwork. He turned toward the clerk. Strike the charge. Dismiss the case. Effective immediately. The prosecutor blinked. Your Honor. No, Counselor, the judge said firmly. Sit down. I don't want to hear one more word of procedure today. Not when this man's life is what we're talking about. The courtroom remained quiet. It wasn't the kind of silence people felt obligated to give. It was the kind that came from being stunned awake. Like they were realizing they'd just watched something sacred happen, and nobody wanted to be the one to break it. Curtis stood there, motionless. His hands hung at his sides, calloused and cold, still marked by years of carrying things no one else could see. Sergeant Ellison, Judge Halbrook said, using the title on purpose. There's a caseworker meeting you in the lobby. She's already secured you a temporary apartment in Florissant. It's quiet, it's safe, and there's no curfew. Curtis furrowed his brow. Just like that? No, not just like that, the judge replied. Took me 2 hours of calls and one favor I'll never get back. But you've earned 1,000 more. The veteran in the front row clapped once. It echoed. Then others followed. A few stood. No one spoke. Curtis looked down at his feet. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Halbrook said. Just go live. Just go take back whatever time they haven't stolen. Curtis gave the smallest of nods, then turned. As he walked past the rows of people, they moved aside, not because he asked them to, but because they finally understood who he was. Not a drifter, not a bum, not a ghost. He passed the bailiff who had first stood up earlier. The young man raised a hand halfway, unsure whether to salute. Curtis offered a slow nod and kept walking. Outside the courtroom, a woman in a VA-issued windbreaker waited by the elevator. She smiled as she spotted him, a clipboard tucked under her arm. You must be Mr. Ellison, she said. He looked her over. You're not another social worker with a pamphlet, are you? She grinned. No, sir, I'm the woman holding the keys. He laughed. An actual laugh, tired and real. Well, all right then. The elevator dinged. She held the door open as he stepped inside. Back inside the courtroom, Judge Halbrook sat down slowly. He glanced at the prosecutor, who still looked stunned. This isn't going in the press, Halbrook said. This isn't politics. This is what justice is supposed to look like. The prosecutor gave a slow nod. Understood. A minute later, the docket resumed. The next defendant, a teenager charged with shoplifting, stepped forward. But the energy had shifted. People weren't just looking at the judge anymore. They were watching the seat Curtis had left behind, still warm, still carrying the weight of something bigger than one man. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. Curtis walked across the parking lot with the caseworker. The sidewalk still shimmered with puddles, but the sky was clearing. He pulled out his dog tags from beneath his shirt and held them for a moment. Not for pride, not for recognition, but because they had made it through everything with him. And now, they were walking into something new. But as the glass doors of the courthouse closed behind him, Curtis Ellison wasn't walking away from the system. He was walking toward a second chance, and this time, the door wasn't locked. The VA caseworker, Janice, led Curtis through the sliding doors of the courthouse without rushing him. She moved with the quiet confidence of someone who'd seen too many stories like his, but rarely watched one end like this. Curtis squinted against the pale sunlight pushing through the clouds. It was the first time in weeks he'd felt daylight without rain. His jacket still clung to the dampness of the holding cell, but his shoulders sat a little higher now, like the weight he'd carried for years had shifted, just enough to let him breathe. They reached her silver Honda parked near the curb. She popped the trunk and offered him a clean gym bag. "There's a change of clothes in here," she said. "Shower's waiting at the apartment. It's not fancy, but it's yours." Curtis held the bag in both hands, staring at it like it was too much to believe. "They always say temporary. That usually means 3 days. Janice leaned against the car and crossed her arms. "Not this time. We already got you in the HUD-VASH program. It's real. You'll be getting long-term housing support, health benefits reactivated, mental health counseling too, if you want it." He stared at her, trying to measure whether she really meant it. "Why now?" he asked. "Why today?" She looked him in the eye. "Because a judge who remembered who you were refused to let you keep disappearing." Curtis gave a slow nod, then climbed into the car. The engine hummed to life. The radio was off. No small talk, just silence. The comfortable kind. They drove past downtown, over the Martin Luther King Bridge and into Florissant. Janice parked in front of a small brick apartment building with ivy crawling up the side. A mailbox read, "Unit 2B, reserved." Inside, the apartment smelled like bleach and fresh paint. The windows were open. A twin bed with new sheets, a worn recliner, a kitchenette. The basics. But clean, safe, his. Curtis stepped in slowly, like his boots might leave marks on the floor. He turned around once, taking it in. "You sure this ain't someone else's?" "Nope. It's yours," she said, setting the key on the counter. "You get 2 weeks of groceries delivered, toiletries in the cabinet, and a phone charger. We'll help you get a phone if you don't have one." "I don't," he said. "We'll fix that." He sat on the edge of the bed, ran his hand over the comforter like it was silk. "Feels strange." Janice crouched next to him. "That's okay. Strange can be a start." She stood and smiled. "I'll be back in 2 days to check in. You just rest. You've earned it." Curtis didn't argue. He didn't say thank you either. Some words were too small for moments like this. When the door closed behind her, he sat there for a while. No clock ticking, no coughing from the bunk below, no boots walking past on cold cement, just a room of his own. He got up and walked to the bathroom. The mirror over the sink showed him a man he hadn't really looked at in years. A little more grey in the beard, a little more shadow in the eyes. But the same man who'd walked through war and somehow kept walking through everything after it. He reached under his shirt and pulled out the dog tags again. One of them had Janine's name etched into the back. A little thing he'd added after her funeral, when he couldn't afford a headstone. He kissed it gently and placed it on the dresser, not to let go, but to rest. The bed creaked slightly as he lay back. Curtis closed his eyes and, for the first time in a long while, didn't dream of fire or running or rain. He just slept. Peacefully. There's a Curtis Ellison in every city. Someone who gave everything and got nothing back. The system doesn't always see them. But we can. And we should. because one moment of compassion can be the thing that changes everything. If this story moved you, share it. Let someone else hear what justice can sound like when someone finally listens. And don't forget to subscribe. We have more stories that matter, just like this one.